Welcome to Reuters Events Pharma 2026. Joining us today, we have Natalie Harb, Vice President offering Development Launch Excellence at IQVIA. Natalie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Talking launches, and I just want to kick off with the first question,
Sure.
which is, what are the biggest shifts making launches harder to get right, and where do teams often lose valuable time?
Great question. So I think the first question you said, what are the biggest shifts that we're seeing in the market? So a couple of things happening at the moment. The launch market is becoming very crowded. A lot of pharma companies are launching within the same therapy area. And what's impacting getting it to patients fast is policy pressures. So it's super important now for clients and for pharma companies to really think about value and access very early on in the launch stage. The next shift that we're seeing is that the launch window is becoming a lot shorter. Traditionally, there was the advantage of actually launching a product and learning from what's happening in market and course correct. But right now, because there's a lot happening, the market is very fast moving. The launch period time has gotten really, really shorter. The other shifts we're seeing is obviously we cannot talk about any shifts in the industry without talking about AI and about data. Data is in abundance. There's a lot of data that teams have access to. But what we're seeing now is that a lot of teams, whilst data has been pulled together, insights is very much still fragmented. So that's one of the shifts that we're seeing. And last but not least is the customers as well is very fragmented. Traditionally, the customer group would have been just one, the HCP. Now we're seeing multiple customer groups. So when pharma is launching, they really need to have a launch plan that is segmented to meet the new segments coming up. So HCP, payers, providers, patients, and it also needs to be very orchestrated. So orchestration is the key thing. I think the second part of the question, if I remember, you asked is around what are they losing time?
Where teams most often lose valuable
Where
time.
they lose most valuable time, absolutely. Just tying it back to what I mentioned, starting late in the process with value and access, right? It's really, really important. It's becoming the key now for getting products fast to market. So I think where they lose time is if they start it late, you really need to focus on starting it early. The other thing where we're seeing clients or areas of losing time is around misalignment within the organization. I think really trying to get alignment from day one is really, really key. Different functions that are working on the launch, global team versus local team, where the launch is going to be executed, need to be aligned. And last but not least, a very simple one really is around the launch planning. What we tend to see is people spend a lot of time planning for the launch and building 100 pages of documents around launch planning, but really not paying attention to execution, right? So building these amazing launch plans, but not focusing on execution. So I think, instead of spending so much time, obviously it's quite important, but shift it a little bit towards around execution, because that's where really the value is realized.
Right, okay. Now you've seen a lot of launches. What are some of the classic, biggest preventable mistakes that you've seen launch leaders make? Talk us through those.
Some mistakes. Again, I'm going to stick with AI just because I've been talking about this for the last couple of days. AI really helps decisions. So some of the mistakes we've seen is people not using artificial intelligence or even agents quite early on. For example, if you think about forecasting is every launch has to do a forecasting. AI-enabled forecasting really allows us from way early on to build real proactive scenarios up front and allow us to do course correction. So using AI quite early in the journey and not leaving it late, I think is one of the biggest mistakes we tend to see. The next mistake we tend to see is that locking that positioning very early on. So you're building a launch plan, you say, okay, my launch positioning is the following, and launch is going to happen in 12 months. Between that time, a lot has changed. You got to revisit it and make your launch plans and your launch positioning a little bit more proactive and a little bit more agile, really. And I think the last thing, again, is around, where we see mistakes happening is treating launch as an end date and not as a multi-year journey. Focus on the launch date, that's quite important, but equally focus on pre-launch, 12 to 36 months before the launch, and also post the launch. So it's not just a date, it's actually a life cycle. And all parts of the life cycle is actually quite important.
Fantastic. Now, you mentioned AI there.
Yeah.
Let's zero in on that in a bit more detail. What makes the biggest difference for brand teams during a launch when it comes to AI? How does it make a difference to their work?
To be honest with you, we're seeing the launch life cycle. I mean, if you think about what the launch life cycle is, there's three parts to it for a very simplistic perspective. There's planning, there's alignment, and there's execution. So it's a launch cycle like that. What we're seeing AI is bending that curve upwards, meaning it's making it a lot more productive for brand teams to use AI. So at a planning stage, I spoke about forecasting, right? Traditional forecasts can be very, very manual. Excel is still being used to do it. It's reactive, it's not proactive. With an AI-enabled tool, what you're able to do is use market detection signals early and be predictive in terms of what you're proposing. And what we're seeing is 30 to 40% accuracy in forecast using AI versus traditional model. But that's not all. We're also seeing that the forecast is being delivered to the organization in a more shorter period of time. It used to take 2 weeks in the olden days of Excel. Still, we use the Excel. However, now we can deliver forecasts within 5 days. Then if you move to another stage of the launch life cycle, like I mentioned, the market is becoming very crowded. There's a lot of competition within the same therapy areas. AI tools are helping us identify eligible patients. And what we're seeing as a result is, by working with our clients, they're helping to identify up to 5 times more eligible patients for treatment than they would have done before. And we're able to link them with their treating physician. So the impact of that for brand teams is that we're seeing a 20% uplift in prescription level within the first 6 months of a launch. So massive, massive impact across the launch life cycle for pharma and for our clients and brand teams.
Once a product's out there in the market, what enables teams to detect performance issues quickly? What's their best tool?
To be honest with you, this is something that I've spoken to a lot with different people during this conference, this amazing conference today. And typically, KPIs, but typically KPIs is around sales. Obviously, sales is really important, but really to detect what's happening from a performance perspective, I think other KPIs needs to be looked at. For example, new prescriber adoption versus plan, right? That's a KPI that really needs to be looked at. Patient onboarding, how many new patients are on therapy, but also how many patients are dropping off your therapy and understanding why they are. So these are new KPIs together with sales KPI that's super important to start looking at. And once you identify those, you're able to fix performance. Because if you understand why patient tried your drug and then they stopped, and if you understand the reasoning behind that, then you're able to make more actions and put some action plans in place.
Fantastic. What should launch teams look for in a partner to help deliver measurables or measurable impact?
Oh, another great question. First and foremost, we work in healthcare. So the quality of data is king, right? So a vendor has to be compliant. Data security needs to be key, especially when we talk about, whether we're working with different types of data. So for me, having a vendor that's extremely compliant around data is important. The next thing for me is around having a partner, I should say, not even a vendor, that is looking at launch both from a global and a local perspective. Launch plans are usually designed at a global level, executions happen at a local level. So having a partner that has teams in the local market that's able to advise on strategies for local payer access, for pricing reimbursement is clear. So a vendor with a global presence, but ultimately a very strong local presence as well. And I think the last thing that I want to touch upon in terms of what they should look for a vendor is the domain expertise. We talk a lot about AI. AI in healthcare is as good as, it's only good, as if it's grounded in the sciences and in the clinical pathways and how launches have performed in different markets and across different stakeholders. So a partner who's supported a lot of launches is really important because they bring a lot of what's worked, but also what's not worked and help, the person and the client in question launch better.
Fantastic. Natalie Harb at IQVIA, thank you so much for sharing your insights today.
Thank you.